Good evening, everybody. Scott Stevens here on a Friday night. Yeah, we made it. I think either way we're here, and that's ultimately what matters. It's been a pretty good week weather-wise. We've been dancing with Ada for 14 days now, believe it or not, since Halloween when it was given its name. South of Haiti, a good distance south of Haiti, but nonetheless, it was Halloween when that storm was named or christened, if you will, and it's been wandering in the Gulf and into the Caribbean for that period of time since Halloween. Finally, we've can kind of kiss it goodbye, and that's a good thing. It wasn't. Yeah, it was. It was kind of intense. It was honestly, it was really intense. So once that's out of the way, then we've got another storm right on its heels. Let's get to it so we can get this Friday done, and on to the rest of your celebratory activities for a Friday night. All right, here's the path Etta took as it developed way south of Haiti and then worked towards the west, a fairly good clip, and then just paused off the coast of Honduras, Nicaragua, as a Cat 5 storm made its way inland, maintained its integrity, came down to a tropical storm, emerged off the north coast of El Salvador, and then back into the Western Caribbean. Back over those warm waters. It paused for a little bit. In fact, we have a break in the line. So either that was an artist error or there was a break in the continuity of its naming, but I tend to think not. And then it strengthened up, crossed out right through the heart of Cuba, back in through, grazed the Florida Keys last weekend, and then did another little loop off the western tip of Cuba, and then continued off towards the north and east before finally being swept out into the North Atlantic. And it was visible today, but the tropical nature, the thunderstorms wrapping around that center core had been stripped off from the north, revealing an exposed core. And then it became asymmetrical, meaning much stronger on one side or the other, and that kind of a signifier that it was moving extratropical or becoming extratropical. And ultimately that means that it isn't the warmest of the storm that's at the core, but trying to be drawn into it. So that was Etta. Final advisory, completed a 2-week odyssey, devastating Jamaica, Cat 4 impacted Nicaragua, deadly floods through Central America as it decayed, rebirth of the Caribbean, and then impact as a tropical storm through Cuba, South Florida, loop of the Gulf, and then it's off towards the north. And maybe that'll be the last time we see that letter for a while. Well, and then just because, 2020 is 2020 from a couple of days ago, but just hard to share, a wild hog floating down the river near Warsaw, Georgia. I think that's just kind of cool because, the more you watch animal videos, the more you realize they're so much like us. They're so much like us, and they should enjoy life. All right, Tropical Depression 31 is formed in the Central Caribbean Sea. It's forecast to strengthen and approach to Central America as a hurricane early next week. It has, since this was released by NHC Atlantic 12 hours ago, it has gotten a name, another storm that has been devastating, this time over in the Philippines. This is Ulysses. And so much water, so much rain that it overtopped a dam. And that's this dam is that it was releasing maximum capacity. And we saw with the Three Gorges Dam in China, when you begin to have multiple dams and they all end up at capacity or in some cases overtopping their maximum fill line or literally the top of the dam, then we begin to see catastrophic flooding downstream in places that hadn't had floods prior to these dams' arrivals. And so they're great for many years, but then when the dam has problems and cannot hold back that which it's asked to, it has to let it go. And then the downstream rivers run very high for quite some time. So that's what's going on in the Philippines. And we'll get to that. There's a tropical. That's iota. It's not 31 any longer. It's just straight up iota. So San Mateo dog pound needs help. His dogs are trapped in the roofs for hours waiting for rescuers. This again in the Philippines. And we know just how many wild dogs, feral dogs, and some aren't even that. It's just the humans could not take the dogs, or they left in such a hurry, or they got separated from the masters. But nonetheless, it's just kind of an indication of the need that's in place. And there's some aerials of the flooding in the Philippines from Ulysses. And it's just water rises, and in these flat flood plains, it keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, and the average water level in some of these towns was upwards of 4 meters, or about 12 feet. So really kind of intense and widespread, and it's going to be a while before that quantity of water can be absorbed by the stream flow, by the waterways, and then delivered back out into the Pacific, and or the South China Sea in that particular case. So it's going to come out, but it's going to take some time. There's a lot of people just hanging out on rooftops, and then their batteries in their phones are dead. So it's really kind of hard to bring people and bring those rescue services to the aids of these individuals, especially when the quantity of those in need is so great. And this is kind of cool. When you get light crystals, this is just the crystals forming in the air simply because it is so cold. Nothing with aurora, nothing along those lines. It's just the lights from below illuminating the crystals, and because they can kind of tend to take a similar orientation, you'll see those light pillars. And yeah, it's cold there. Really cold. Oregon Trail today would have been very cold, tough to traverse on any good day, but back in the 1800s with snow, it would have been near impossible. In fact, it'd be kind of silly to be out there traversing unprotected in that kind of gear, as so many pioneers and explorers were back in the early, but especially mid 1800s. But Baker City, Oregon, getting some snow from this particular event that continues to press ashore. We'll look at radar in a moment, but in its wake, it's leaving some very, very healthy snows. And that's good news for the fire centers, as they're still at a level 2. They'll probably ease that back to 1. There were new fires reported, 2 in Oklahoma, 1 in Kentucky, and an additional 1 in Utah. But the good news is 10 large fires were contained today, or at least achieved that status. There's still probably some hot spots putting out some of that kind of work going on with 4 new fires, but typically those tend to be dry and grassland fires down in this area where we get into November, and there just is not a lot of moisture in the vegetation, which reached its maturity back in July and August, and it's just been hanging out waiting to be eaten, so it can be recycled. So Big Ridge sitting out in the Pacific, a nice river of moisture aiming towards the west coast. We saw this guy come ashore, and all this bubbly stuff, that's the cold air cumulus in its wake, and that's pressing ashore through the Cascades now. In fact, all the way into central Idaho, but some pretty good snowfall totals: 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 inches on the valley floors. Absolutely more than that as we get into the mountainous locations. And as I was looking at this imagery today, it would have been in this Cirrus Shield. And for guys watching down in the southern plain states into the Ohio, Tennessee River valleys, be curious to see what kind of trails you saw in and amongst, because tends to be these feathery edges of these cloud shields, especially on the leading edge of a high pressure ridge like this is right here, where you would see those trails. That also, in this little disturbance rolling through the Great Lakes states, I would absolutely expect to see some trails, some contrails or chemtrails. All right, record heat really not going to be in place until we get into the middle of next week, with a couple of record highs, but largely suppressed to deep into the desert Southwest. Maybe Albuquerque at 69 for a record, Winslow, Arizona at 75, Needles at 88, Phoenix at 89. So it's good to see those records coming back down below that 90-degree mark, but hey, we've been in solar winter since the 5th of November, so going on a full week here. Warmest to date, 92 at McAllen, Wesalco, Texas, and also just southwest of Pharr, Texas, at 92, and then Peter Sinks, Utah, 23 below zero. Peter Sinks, one of those cold little valleys, those little narrows, and that cold air, you open your fridge, and you don't usually feel the cold air up here, you feel it on your toes. Down below, cold air is heaviest. So it's in those valleys where the fog forms because it's coldest. The atmosphere reaches condensation first there. So fog or frost forms at the lowest points first, and then the freezing conditions, and then the fog builds up from those coldest locations, which are the absolute surface of whatever is exposed to the open sky. All right, there's iota right now, slowly moving west-southwest at about 3 knots or 3 miles an hour with winds 40-ish. You'd notice it if it were overhead, certainly with some rain and some attendant thunder. Theta a little bit stronger, now moving towards the east at 10 miles an hour. This has had an easterly component its entire lifespan, as the Bermuda high tends to be about right in through, Bermuda's here, but right in through here. So that would leave it towards the north side of that. and then that cell, doesn't usually get that far east. It does, but not very often. It tends to hang out in the middle of the Atlantic. So below that, it's going to progress to the west. Onto the north side of that, these little disturbances will progress eastbound. This will look at some temperatures and then some what are termed streamlines. These are lines upon which, let me recycle this just to kind of wake up the map so it realizes it does not have to be in passive mode. There we go. And then there's the streamlines that you get at the Casper, and you've got crazy winds out of the southwest at 40 miles an hour, 43 degrees. That tells you the front is close. Billings 42, but you get back behind it. Dillon at 34, Boise 37 with a rain snow mix. Zoom in just a touch, and we'll begin to see some of the cooler temperatures showing up, like Idaho Falls 36, probably Tremont in there, Utah at 35 degrees. So it's in that rain snow mix. You have to get off the valley floors before we get above the freezing level. It's amazing how that freezing level really likes to mirror the surface. So the weather service can say snow above 5,000 feet, but you get to 51, 5,200 feet, and you're just still, it's in a mix. You're just at a little bit above that freezing mark. So kind of cool there. But that's the winter storm. And as it moves into the plains, it's kind of going to lose its ump. We've even got some light snows into Colorado. Not much will make it to Pueblo or the Springs, probably not. But the south winds we see here, and I'm going to throw up dew point and humidity. The dew points, these are still dry dew points, really, really dry dew points. They're 49 at Fort Worth, Dallas. So they're starting to come up, but there's just not a lot of winds. There's not a lot of transport of the moisture up. So that's going to inhibit this storm from really turning into much until it's able to tap some more Texas or Gulf Coast moisture, some of this low-level moist jet it'll draw it into it. But that's about 36 hours away, so maybe a day and a half. All right, what do we have here? I've got so many tabs open, it's kind of tough to keep it all. There's the rain. There's the radar. As we see that activity, will come in a little bit closer, and there's Idaho with maybe some good showers in the Snake River Plain, some rain snow mix. Idaho Falls up into the Rexburg area, probably St. Anthony and Ashton and points northbound. It's snowy, and I'm sure Monida Pass kind of sketchy tonight. Even the Malad Pass or even the Teton Pass coming out of Driggs and then over into the Jackson Hole area going to be snow covered. So tonight is one of those nights where you are really, really glad that the other person, or maybe even you, said, honey, we got to go. Let's go early. Let's get out ahead of this thing, because that's where we want to be. We want to be at our destination. We don't want to be out in the driving. So there's the south winds coming up on Texas, and then the warm front it isn't trying. It is. It's gathering some steam with the dew points already in returns at 60s and 70s in South and mid Texas. So the humidity is back, and then that'll be drawing into the storm, and we'll see it really, really come together a little bit better. Let's go right into this, and we'll see it right there. There's the rain snow now in the Pacific Northwest, and then the center of the low. Oh, come on. Right here. Here's our lows. And then they really forms right here, deepens to a 994 or 984 and strengthens even more. Once it taps the moisture, you can see once we break this barrier, about this 100th latitude, so often that's just a place where things light up because of water and its ability to hold heat. It's crazy that in this whole global warming BS, it's warming, but it isn't because of CO2. CO2 cannot hold heat. It's too simple. It takes water. Water is the magic molecule. It's just the magic molecule. And then the storm winds up and then heads off to the east. So, but not before dumping a whole lot of snow in eastern Canada. Another one off the west coast really doesn't progress inwards beyond maybe the Tetons. And this is coming up on this Wednesday. So 4 or 5 days out, it comes ashore, does kind of the same thing. And then another chunk of energy returns from the south. And then that eventually lights up. There it is right there across Utah, northwest Colorado, southern Wyoming. This exactly a week from now, next Friday, we'll see another round of snow developing through the central Rockies and then streaking very quickly out of the plains as a rain-snow combination. And then that begins Thanksgiving week. We're going to start Thanksgiving week with some snow in the Rockies, and then much of the rest of the week outside of the Cascades is fairly tame until we get to the following weekend. All right, we're going to end that there since, it is Friday night. And everybody would like to do something else than scrolling through their feed on Facebook. There's better things to do, maybe. Maybe. All right. Let's come out of this. I'm going to show you Bitcoin because that's just rocking, guys. Bitcoin. Look at this chart all the way back. Let's go way back. Let's go back to the last bull market. Look at that. Look at that spike. That was back in late 2017. Big old crash the next year. Middle of 19 crash when all the markets crashed this March, and now it's beginning to build up. So if you ever really wanted to have something to play with, this is your baby. This is exciting. This is going to be interesting where this goes as the economy does its weird old things in the coming couple of weeks, because stuff is strange. All right, that's it for Friday. I'm out of here. I'll catch you on Monday for another perspective where we'll talk about lockdowns. Lockdowns. That's what's coming. How do you make a living? How do you negotiate? Do we need to do this all over again? And to what end?